Are we live? Yeah, we're live. All right. So this is the Great Johannes speaking. I'm trying a new dual live setup where I'll have this one on TikTok. It's my computer webcam with the nice boxing. This is by George Bellows, a painting from the early 1920s. This style came in fashion in those days. Wait, I can probably show it here. Great paintings. Look up this artist. And I've got a webcam, my cell phone cam on the cell phone Wi-Fi, the cell phone network over here. Let's see if that goes. Let me see if the YouTube live is working because I can see your comments probably here, but I don't know if it's working. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just interesting to try it out. All right. Got this over here, got this over there. Right, I wanted to discuss a whole bunch of topics, maybe do an extra long live stream like for 2 hours or so. And so let's take it easy. Let me relax for a second before I race ahead, you know. We can talk about the Iran thing. Definitely talk about Iran. We can talk about Trump. We talk about HOMAF or whatever we want to talk about. Let me look up some articles as well. Yeah, so I'll put up a poll. Can I do that? TikTok gives me this option. I should be able to poll and gifts. Let me see. Oh, right. Quick poll. Quick poll start. All right. Oh, they can see I couldn't edit it. What kind of stupid shit is that? I wanted to edit the poll. No, it wouldn't let me do that. All right. I'll try that some other time. What do I think is going to happen between Iran and the USA? I think American hubris eventually is going to shut down the USA. I think there's a genuine possibility that the Americans are going to fail at what they're trying to do because they are too arrogant. Because of this is a whole explanation. So remember when Ukraine did the drone attacks within Russia, the surprise attack? They had these drones shipped in via trucks through their spy network in Russia, and they assembled the drones inside Russia, and those drones attacked uh, nuclear bomber planes and missile stations and so on. Then why did Iran leave its equipment out in the open unprotected? That's weird. You don't do that. We in the West have what I call maybe victor syndrome. This is a strange word. Victor syndrome, I made it up. It means that you are so convinced that you are the victor that you're not going to bother trying to second guess your enemy's points of view. But the enemy thinks differently, right? So that's hubris, when you are convinced already that you are perfect and you can't fail and do whatever you want and you will always succeed. But of course the Americans have a problem. The Iranians saw what happened in Iran, in Russia. Why didn't they act? Why didn't the Iranians uh, hide their equipment, protect their equipment? You know, you can easily protect against drones with shotguns or even with uh, nets or something, steel nets or something. You could have buried some of your equipment in the sand. You have a lot. You have plenty of sand in in Iran, so that's not the issue. Why would you leave them in the open? Because it's a lure. It's a trap. You allow the Israelis to bomb Iran, and then you allow the Americans to bomb the bunker because you've removed all the equipment. Of course, you've moved your plutonium and your uranium to wherever, right? So that's not the issue. Um, uh, I think I think uh, Iran was expecting all of this. The Americans feel like they're the winners, and that's the worst possible thing, right? When you let your enemy win, think they have won. That's what's happened. The Americans think they've won. Uh, So my logic is the Iranian regime is being backed by Russia and China strategically as well in terms of military, what to do. I think it's being directed from China. And Iran is playing the angle of, we're going to let the Americans bomb us, we're going to let Israel bomb us, so that we can tell the world that they are the terrorists. And so you get a lot of other parties on your side. You get Pakistan on your side. You get uh, basically the majority of the world on your side in this conflict against Israel. Since it is really the West against the rest, it is really the 1 billion of the West versus the 7 billion of the rest of the world. And if the other 7 billion manage to unite, they will unite against us in the West. And how are we going to defend ourselves against this? Well, not with transgenderism, not with fat soldiers in the USA, overweight people, not with mentally feeble leftists who've never suffered adversity, who can't deal with being stung by a bee, so to speak. So yeah, I'll try to keep this interactive as well. I see that I have my live stream on YouTube as well at the Great Johannes over here. If people are watching, I'll be mainly focusing here on my computer system for the TikTok. If you prefer YouTube, you can go over there at the Great Johannes. In terms of the Jews, you've got to imagine they also play all sides. So you have Jews supporting the West, and you have other Jews supporting the East, like George Soros supports the Open Society. He supports Palestine, right? And he supports China even, right? So George Soros, it's not like all the Jews are Zionists. It's more like half of Jews are Zionists and the other half are Bolsheviks or communists, right? But again, we are getting bogged down always in this debate of uh, who's whose side are you on? Are you with Iran or with Israel? Are you with Russia or with Ukraine? Are you with China or the USA? But we in Europe need to learn to be for Europe. that's always the strange problem, that Europeans don't seem to consider or pause for a moment that we actually exist and we have our own interests and our own strategic goals to pursue. So the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, they have they kicked off their month-long or so meetup in the Netherlands, in The Hague. It's costing our country a fortune to host all these special top brass people, right? And Mark Rutte already declared that the American attack on Iran was not a war crime. Of course, it was a war crime. It was unprovoked, so it was a war crime. Right? You don't just bomb someone's country because they're building a nuclear reactor. That's like, imagine Iran bombing Germany because Germany has solar panels. That's a bit extreme. I know they say, yeah, but um, uh, Germany isn't using its solar panels to wage war. Yes, it is. Have you noticed how the leader of Germany, Friedrich Merz, is a puppet on a string? He does everything the Americans tell him to do, and he feels deeply uncomfortable with it doing because he's actually a leftist. He actually personally, privately supports Palestine, but publicly as a politician now he has to say he supports Israel. It's really truly sad if you have to be a politician like that. That's probably number one reason why I wouldn't go into politics to do the national parliament thing. Yeah, I want to get active in the world. I told you about this if you've been following me. But do I really belong in the national parliament like in the Netherlands? That's the only place where I could do it. And if I watch our national politics, it's a puppet show for immature people. It's not serious. It's a kindergarten. Um, I don't belong there. I need to be out in the streets leading some kind of a true revolution, but then something for all of Europe and not just something uh, for a national parliament. These small countries in the Netherlands just don't have any, like Belgium or something, or even Germany. That's not where the power is, right? So most Europeans are puppets. Yeah, most European leaders are puppets. That's absolutely true. All right, I'm gonna promote my live streams for a second on my Twitter. I have a Twitter X account at JohannesMKX, so you can also go there if you want to. Here we go. Content live. Oh, here we go. I can actually go to my live or my YouTube, so I can have a look at this one too. Oh, pause. Oh no, sound off. All right, all right. I'm gonna pause this one. Okay, cool. Give me a second. I'm gonna see if I can do like a 2 hour long live stream today. Maybe 3 hours. It depends. Maybe I need to take a break in between them, and I'll just do something longer, right? So hi, I'm promoting my live on X. Let's see if that works or not, because I know it's Monday, right? Monday evening. Yeah. Live on YouTube. Post this one. Oh, let me turn off. How do I do that? No, it's all right. Pop out the chat. All right. All right. And I guess I'll. Yeah, just a minute. I'm just gonna post some stuff. That's the downside of a live stream, is that you sometimes have to do something while you're live. So, all right. I got the link live on. By the way, have you guys seen what Home Math is posting on X? He has an X account, and he's posting like really hardcore, right wing, pro white stuff. You know, it's good to have this guy on our side, isn't it? I get the impression he's even well aware of the JQ, the Jewish question. So we used to have these brackets that we would say like our people or pull our side, if you understand what I'm talking about. All right. I got 3 people watching me on YouTube and a bunch here on TikTok. Usually I get to 100 viewers or so on TikTok after like 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes. Yeah. Right. Have you seen the big demonstrations and the protests in Ireland? There's been these anti-immigration protests, but it really has to culminate into change. We want change. We want to overthrow this multiculturalist nonsense and do away with diversity forever. And understand perhaps that we've gone through this phase where we had high wealth and we could afford to live with all sorts of people around the world, but also now realize that due to the declining economies of the global economy, we are perhaps returning to the situation where we're not going to have the wealth that we can squander on diversity, and we're going to start, like Breeze says here, total remigration, return migration, return to sender. Like, there was a politician in Denmark recently who said this. It should be totally uncontroversial to say that by the end of this century, white Danish people will be the majority of Denmark. Right. And in Europe, of course, Europeans, meaning that means white people, by the end of this century will be the majority of Europe. And we should be the majorities in all of our countries. And that means a lot of people will just have to go. Have you seen La Fête de Musique in France, this music festival? It was all over. Weirdos from Bangladesh with syringes stabbing women, pretending to be doctors. They're real doctors. Finally, the migrant doctors arrived. They're stabbing women, poisoning young women. Right? They're shouting at white women, haram, haram, that they're not clean, right? And then there's one of these videos where a young woman says, "Well, I'm glad I'm Christian." Wow, that's how the resistance starts. You see, I think in the end, ultimately, Europeans are going to need a strong, unified religion, which is going to be Catholicism or Christianity by and large, in order to push back against the diversity and immigration. There's going to be a massive conflict between Islam and Christianity on European soil because most of the migrants coming in are Muslims, right? And that does not work well. It does not sit well with with ordinary people. I mean, you think that normies, like the normie white people, that they allow all this to happen. Partially, it's because when they vote for their liberal Democrat parties, they actually think that the Democrats are going to solve the immigration problem. You can't fathom this. Like, people vote more. The voting behavior of Europeans definitely is class based. So if you're working class, you will vote for the working class parties, not knowing that these labor parties are the ones bringing in more laborers through immigration, right? They're not going to solve the problem that they profit off of. Because in the end, the labor wings of European politics are also just an extension of the corporate marketing wing. You know, we want cheap labor for the corporations, while at the same time, that's what's driving up the housing market prices, why we can't live in our own countries anymore, right? It's a money grab. I think if you imagine it this way, the financial elites of Europe are just grabbing the cash, the tax coffers, the state coffers that are being emptied um, through corporate subsidies. Do you understand this? That what we call the government, say the government of the Netherlands, what do they really do? Who do they really serve? Well, they give money to their corporate friends to build infrastructure. So if Shell or Philips or some other big company needs infrastructure, those corporations don't pay for the infrastructure themselves. They get the government to build it for them. They get, basically, that's what they tax people for, so that corporations can build the infrastructure they need. But that doesn't mean they're going to maintain your bridges and your schools and your hospitals. No. The reason we have good hospitals in the Netherlands is because the white boomer class is rich, and they've paid a lot into uh, insurances. And so through their insurances that they've been paying into for 40, 50 years, they get to have really high quality hospital services, right? But this isn't because our taxes are going to hospitals or anything. No, they're just squeezing out. They're both taxing you, and through insurances taxing you again, and in other ways taxing you again. And that's what they're all doing. It's got nothing to do with I have my YouTube chat, but there's only 4 people watching on my YouTube. I'm trying to do a dual live stream here. If you want to go on YouTube, it's at the Great Johannes here. Well, 9/11 happened. Someone asked this. Of course, it happened, but the question is, what happened and who did it? So I read a book by Gerhard Wisniewski about 9/11, and it's just I think basically he told the truth. It's just such an eye opener. There were no planes. There were drones with fake transponders that crashed into the towers. The towers were full of explosives. Like, you have this. Do you know that old cartoon with the Roadrunner? Yeah, and he runs through a wall, and you see like the shadow or the shape of him crashing into a rock or something. That's what they did with 9/11. You had the shape of the airplane as a sort of shadow, right? A sort of hole into the top of the building in with the shape of the wings intact, which is impossible. If you crash a plane like that into a building, the plane will evaporate. It will crumble like paper. It doesn't harm the building the way they pretended it would. And then for the building to catch fire, and then the fire is what crashed the buildings. No, the buildings were rigged with explosive. It was a controlled demolition, top to bottom, a control top to bottom. Yeah, no, bottom to top, because the explosion started in the bottom. The building starts caving in, pancaking. So the bottom floors fell before the top floors fell. All right, it was total controlled demolition, and you wonder how they do that. There was elevator maintenance. So in the year leading up to the collapse of the Twin Towers, they were going to renovate the elevator shafts. But through the elevator shafts, you win access to the crawl spaces in between all the floors. Those crawl spaces is where you place all the explosions. And then the top floors were being renovated, remember? So the top floors were totally available to American terrorists, Israeli terrorists, the CIA, and the Mossad, and their henchmen. The only thing I find remarkable is, to pull this off, you must have had thousands of people, at least, in the know, and maybe the whole intelligence community, which is almost 1 million people in the USA, they knew about this, and none of them ever spoke up. None of them ever said anything. Maybe because they know that if they speak, they're killed, right? All right, someone asked me for the name of this book. Well, hold on. I'll Google Gerhard Wisniewski. on the 9/11 book. It was called Operation 9/11. It's available in English. Operation 9/11, The Truth. Okay, Wisniewski. All right. Here they give me the German version, but in the German version it's called Operation 9/11 by Gerhard Wisniewski. But I suppose there must be an English language version of this as well. All right. I think that's what well, you just have to look for the English version by this guy. I'll type it in Gerhard here. This is the name of the author, Wisniewski. Gerhard Wisniewski. I think he's Polish, but he grew up in Germany or something. And Israel killed Kennedy. Yeah, I totally agree. Partially it's because Kennedy did not want Israel to have plutonium enrichment facilities or uranium. They didn't want Israel to have nuclear weapons, so they couldn't defend themselves against Iran later and so on. Kennedy was very strong on like de-escalation. He did not want to escalate conflict with the Soviet Union, because even now the conflict in Israel, it's really, Israel is the hotspot, but Israel is backed by Europe, NATO, and the USA. Palestine and the other interests are backed by Russia, China, Iran, to some extent India. Now the West is trying to get India on its side. Why do you think the West has gotten all these mass immigrants into our countries, into our universities, and all these so-called highly gifted Indian people, right? And their cleanliness. You know, it's because it's a deal. It's basically allegiance in exchange for immigration. So they allow to send their people to us, and then of course they send their remittances back home, right? It's a total scam. Have you heard of this? That Mexico, the president, a Jewish woman is the president of Mexico, said that she doesn't want her people in the USA taxed with remittance taxes. That tells you everything. She said her people, her Mexican people. Basically, parts of the USA are not part of the USA anymore. They're part of Mexico, in the sense that if you look at the economic activities, it's majority Mexican or majority Latino, Hispanic, right? And the money made is majority donated to Mexico, or which is basically a form of taxation. How do you tax if you send 5 million of your people, of Mexican people, to the USA? How do you tax them? How do you tax them? You can't tax them because they're part of they live in another country. So the USA gets to tax these Mexicans unless they're illegals, right? And they don't pay taxes. But then the way to tax them is to get them to send remittances to their mom. And then, of course, their mom spends that money on services within Mexico, which is then ultimately taxed, right? So it's an extra tax. It's just an economic plot. All these poor countries are doing this instead of building up their own economies and making themselves like meaningful and useful to the world by providing services or inventions. No. They are just sending their surplus population, usually their surplus males, the men they don't want, push those out into the Western countries and then tax them through remittances, right? That's what happened, yeah. Right, Palestine Action in the US, in the UK is being made a terrorist group. Yeah, but why isn't Zionist, the Likud party, why isn't that being made a terrorist group? Right? Why isn't American media labeled terrorist? Why do we in Europe have to care about anything the Americans have to say at this point? By which I mean to say, European interests simply don't align with American interests. So how long are we going to keep up with this? Right? What are we tackling here? I'm just doing a live stream. Maybe I'll try to do a 2-hour stream about all sorts of topics, about whatever I can think of here. Well, Taiwan, I don't know, does it belong to China? That's like maybe Israel belongs to Germany because it used to be Christian land, the Crusader land. Yeah, you're right. Israel belongs to Germany. Taiwan belongs to China. Israel belongs to Germany. We should make Israel Christian again. We should make Taiwan Chinese again, right? Make Israel Christian again. Like, I find these games a bit silly. Like, to give you an example of the one sidedness of American thinking about what's going on in Iran. So, an American said, uh, maybe we should bomb the oil wells and the refineries in Iran. That way, we take out the Chinese economy because 90% of the Iranian oil is being sent to China. If not via water, then they can do it nowadays with a railroad. China helped Iran build a railroad, and across the railroad, they can send oil to China. And so my response was, yeah, well, then China would bomb the oil wells and the refineries in Saudi Arabia, and that would destroy the economy of the USA. Imagine it would come to this, that they're going to start bombing each other's oil wells in Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's the end of the global economy. I think that would be the outcome of an actual World War III, a war that is fought to the end. In that kind of war, you will have uh, the the collapse of the global system. It's just going to come to an end, right? Yeah, we can't really flee anywhere. Like, as Western Europe turns into South Africa, do you think there will be a white flight? The white flight already started 30, 40, 50 years ago with the white people moving out of the city centers into the suburbs. You see this, for example, in Sweden, Malmö, the suburbs are white and the city center is where all the browniacs live. Um, you know, Stockholm is no different. Gothenburg, Göteborg, Berlin is like that. It's all these places are like that. Paris is like that. You have like the certain neighborhoods for the white people, and the retreat has already begun. But is this really a measure of us being conquered? I don't think so. I think what we are witnessing here is rather the following, that the city centers, no, because they are cramped, because the spaces are small, are no longer conducive to the lives of white people, and we want out. We feel more comfortable in the roomier, spacier neighborhoods of the suburbs, closer to the countryside, closer to nature, where we can have fresh air, so to speak, and shade instead of just metal and steel and brick everywhere. And that's already begun. And what I think is happening is that is a symptom of the impending collapse of globalism. See, the global economy isn't just going to collapse for no reason. It's going to have symptoms before it collapses. Like an old person becomes frail, they lose a lot of body weight, right? They lose 10%, 20% of their body weight before they die. In the last few weeks before they die, people lose a ton of body weight. That's how it is with the economy, the global economy. We are going to witness symptoms such as the collapse of the cities before the collapse of globalism. You're going to see the collapse of technology. Maybe that cell phones and the internet will stop working. All right, we'll see a return to paper money because electronic money won't work, and so on. What else would we expect? Transportation, your cars, you might, whether you buy an electric car or not, your cars are just going to stop because there won't be energy to move anything. Energy for transportation is going to clock out. And then you're going to have, after you've lived through these symptoms, you have the collapse of the global economy where all of a sudden nothing comes in through imports anymore. And you have to start doing everything on your own. That's why I've already said in other videos that I made, I said that we in Europe need to focus on educating ourselves in terms of the skills and competencies, the survival skills that you're going to need in order to overcome the collapse of globalism. And if we do that right, if we make that our goal and work toward it and work toward acquiring these skills so that we can live effectively without electricity and oil, if we can live without that, if we learn to live without it before it collapses, then we will be fine. Then we will have our way out, right? And I think that's what we're gonna do. Hold on. I noticed that I'm trying to record on YouTube as well, doing a dual stream, but my battery is going down, so I have to remove my lavalier mic and charge it. So the sound will change on the. It's my lavalier mic. This is such an awesome little thing for your. If you want to make TikTok videos, I recommend you get some kind of lavalier microphone. Just it just improves the quality of the sound of your voice so much, so much. Especially if you're in like a windy condition, if you're outside or there's noise in the background, the lavalier focuses on your voice, and that's really great. Yeah. Which city in Western Europe will be the first to end up like Detroit? Well, Paris, of course. Paris, London, Rotterdam, all of them. I think it has already happened, by the way. Large sections of Paris are like basically Detroit, except not with N people, not with Africans, and not with African Americans, but with North Africans, who are arguably even worse because they're just unteachable and aggressive. Right. Do you think Paris is a nice city? I've been there like 15 years ago. Last time I was there, I was at Gare du Nord, and it was the northern train station. It was just Nigerians everywhere. There were no French people there anymore. That was 15 years ago. But of course, for some reason, the migrants, they feel very attracted toward the neighborhoods around central stations. Have you noticed that in Europe, the central station areas are the areas with most immigrants? It's weird, isn't it? Why are they attracted to precisely the sort of places we don't like to be? That's where they go. I'm drinking a lot of water. Yeah. Right. Birmingham, yeah, that's like 80% Muslim. I can't imagine. Or places like Bradford, Birmingham. Crazy. Why did you ever allow this to happen? Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you push back? That's unfathomable. And 2/3 of them don't pay council tax and or benefits from the state, right? Oh, amazing. All right. All right. If you don't hear me speak, I'm just thinking about what to talk about. There's a way of speaking where you clear your mind and you wait for the words to come to you, and then you start speaking. It's sort of a possessed way of speaking, right? I wrote this on X, like the news about the injuries at the music festival in Paris, it numbs you. You've heard these stories so many times. If you're my age, you remember the Cologne in Germany. In Cologne, they had these Sylvester or New Year's Eve attacks 15, 20 years ago where hundreds of girls were raped, gang raped, harassed by the newcomers from North Africa. In Germany, they call them Nafris, 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 like North Africans, Nafris. And at first, I remember our mainstream news completely denied everything. For several days, they denied everything and called it a conspiracy theory made up by internet people. And then the actual police reports came in, and they could not deny it anymore that hundreds of girls had been raped by them. Right? I remember that very well. That's like 20 years ago. Now you see this news about the music festival in Paris, La Fête de Musique, or whatever it was called. Hundreds of women have been stabbed with syringes and poisoned. Right? Jesus. The people who do that, the syringe stabbers, they're not victims of socioeconomics. They're mentally ill criminals. And we're waiting for our military to deal with them. Wow, 75% of the Somalis are in council flats, huh? And here you see Birmingham in the 1970s was 95% white, clean streets, and now it's a lawless Pakistani gang city. Yeah, horrible. Let's see if I can do a poll. I wanted to do a poll, but last time I tried, it didn't go right. Live goal. Gift vote. You can't create new vote. Oh, there's an existing poll. Okay. Can't really do anything about it, do I? Stop. All right. All right. Quick poll. Custom poll. All right. Got it. 5-minute duration. No, create new one. All right. Who's going to win World War III? Is it going to be the West? Like USA, NATO, Europe? Or East? Iran, China, Russia? Oh, it doesn't give me enough characters for it. East or West? East or West? I'm going to put up a poll. I don't know if it will show them. Russia. Who's going to win World War III? That'll be interesting. I think World War III is what we're in, you know. Although I think the weapons are more precise now, so you'll see more targeted attacks on infrastructure. They're playing a big game of chess by bombing each other's infrastructure, and say the stock market in Tel Aviv or something, the harbor in Haifa. Have you noticed that we get to see the footage of the explosions and the destroyed buildings in Tehran and Iran, but we don't get to see the damage in Israel? This is because the Israeli media have an embargo. They are telling Western media, they have the power to tell European media and American media not to show the damage in Israel, so that we in the West, our taxpayers, can think that we're still winning. We don't see the damage in Ukraine. We don't see the dead in Ukraine. There's like over 1 million dead men on the Ukrainian side, right? And as many wounded, many of whom will never walk again because they lost their legs. And imagine that kind of a meat grinder, but we don't get to see the damage. We don't get to see who's harming us, how we are being harmed, because if we would show the true damage in Ukraine and Israel, then Western taxpayers would get scared. They would no longer believe that we're winning, right? And they just wouldn't go along with it anymore. Yeah, Qatar is being bombed. Yeah, by whom? Is it Iran bombing Qatar? Because Qatar has all the gas for Europe. That would be a bit of a problem. If tomorrow the gas prices are up, then you know what happened. Iran bombed Qatar. It makes sense, yeah, because Qatar has a pipeline for gas, LNG also, LNG for Europe, and this needs to go through the Strait of Hormuz in many cases. All right. So I think what's happening is Iran knows how they can hurt the West. If I'm right, if I'm right, I think this winter will be very cold in Europe. I don't think we will be able to afford the gas. I think we can already prepare for this now. The Mennonites have good social structure. Yeah, they do. All right, I'm going to start this. I put up a poll. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I need to. I don't know if it's viewable. Who cares? Let's just try it. How would I describe myself ideologically? Well, I don't fit in one box, I suppose. I would say I'm a reactionary, pro-white, pro-Christian reactionary. I'm just more somebody who's just more concerned with the whole moral aspect of our life. And I want Europe, especially the Germanic world, because I am Germanic. I want the Germanic world of Northern Europe to flourish and thrive again. And we can't do that if we are America's bitch. If Germany stays the colony of the USA, so to speak, right? So I'm going to have a look at my Twitter X over here and see if I can pick up something about Qatar. Are you following Ricardo Duchesne? He's great. The anyway, man, people are so fucking stupid. I'm watching a violent clip of somewhere in the USA where you have these fat, stupid mongrels. Really, they're all fat. All the guys are fat and short. They're not white guys. They're like half Latino, half white at best, and they're picking fights. The Latinos are picking fights with the blacks. How's your multiculturalism doing? All right. What about Taiwan? Yeah. Is Taiwan even relevant? I think China is going to do whatever they want, man. Yes, the Ukraine winter was cold. Yeah, they're going to do the same to Europe. Right. Lots of white women have started speaking out nowadays, though, about their experiences. They complain about not being able to take public transportation or go to the movies or do anything by themselves without being harassed by men. But of course, it's immigrant men. And the thing is, more and more white women are saying it out loud that it is immigrant men, right? But then there's another problem. Why aren't the native white European men fighting back? Yeah. Right. Filled with immigrants. Yeah. I think the biggest traitor in our timeline is those are the guys who own the hotels and who rent them out to the government to house immigrants, right? Those guys are making millions, like way more than they normally would have in a tourist season. They're making so much money renting out their apartments to immigrants. They're some of them have become billionaires because of the government money they've been given. It's just awful. Like those guys, man, the traders, they're real traders. The ones who are renting out our countries, those are the real traders because it's paid for with tax money, right? Right. I went to ASML. I did a tour, and they showed you a little bit of the not the EUV. I think the one of these machines, the DUV. I don't know which ones. They showed us these lithography machines are part of it, and I wasn't really impressed. It's not that big, you know. It's I think they could make it smaller into the size of a big microwave or something like, or a small fridge. Uh, if the Chinese, I think the Chinese are ahead of us. I think they have this. I made videos about this on TikTok where I said, you know, of course the Chinese secretly have the newest lithography machines, just like they have 6G cell phone 6G coming on. Right? They have a lot of this stuff that is ahead of us, but it's us in the West who are unwilling to accept this. We have the hubris. The American hubris is infecting our minds, making us think that we're still winning, even though we're basically, uh, what do you call it? A gerontocracy, or a nation ruled by super old people who should not be in power. You know, you despise them. So, Iran attacked a military base in Qatar, a U.S. military base, of course. And Saudi Arabia could be next time because Saudi Arabia also has the biggest U.S. military base in the region. All right, all right. All right. I think I'm going to take a break and then I'll see you next time. Man.